Tim David's recent Grade 2 hamstring strain has sent ripples through the cricketing world, especially given his pivotal role as a power-hitting finisher for the Hobart Hurricanes in the Big Bash League. The injury, sustained while sprinting between the wickets during their December 26th match against the Perth Scorchers, has sidelined him for the remainder of the current BBL season. Scans confirmed a significant partial tear in his right hamstring, ruling him out of immediate competition, but keeping him on track for a hopeful return ahead of the T20 World Cup 2026. This development poses a critical question for fans and analysts alike. How will this injury impact his explosive style of play? And what does the road to recovery look like? Picture this: Tim David, towering at 6'5", charging down the pitch, eyes locked on the crease, muscles primed to explode into a sprint. In that split second, his hamstring acts like a high-tension steel cable, the powerhouse behind his acceleration and deceleration. But during that race to the crease, the cable was stretched beyond its limit. The injury likely occurred at the musculotendinous junction, the delicate transition zone where muscle fibers meet tendon, a known weak spot during rapid lengthening under heavy load. It's akin to a frayed wire in an electrical cable. The damage isn't just surface deep, but affects the core mechanism that transmits power and control. From a biomechanical perspective, the injury happened during what's called the terminal swing phase of running, the final moment before the foot strikes the ground. Here, the hamstring must perform a dual role: decelerate the extending leg to prevent hyperextension and prepare for the next explosive push-off. Research shows that as running speed approaches maximum velocity, hamstring force increases by roughly 30%. For an elite athlete like David, whose game depends on milliseconds and explosive bursts, this eccentric contraction places immense strain on the muscle tendon unit. The sudden demand likely exceeded tissue tolerance, causing microscopic failures that cascaded into a visible partial tear. The hamstring complex itself is a marvel of anatomical engineering, composed of three muscles: the semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. The biceps femoris long head, the usual culprit in sprint-related injuries, is uniquely vulnerable due to its dual innervation. It receives nerve signals from two distinct branches. The tibial nerve supplies the long head, while the common fibular nerve controls the short head. This dual system can lead to asynchronous firing during rapid acceleration and deceleration, creating uneven stress distributions within the muscle. Imagine two halves of a rope pulling out of sync. This mismatch increases the risk of localized overload and injury, especially in high-intensity multi-directional movements like those in T20 cricket. Grade 2 hamstring strains represent a serious injury on the muscle tendon spectrum. They are more than just inflammation or minor fiber disruptions seen in Grade 1 injuries. They involve macroscopic tearing and clear muscle weakness. Think of it as a partially snapped cable that still holds but significantly compromises function. This injury level demands respect because the risk of recurrence is notably high. Studies indicate nearly 1 in 3 athletes will suffer a repeat strain within a year if rehabilitation is inadequate. For David, whose value lies in explosive acceleration and rapid directional changes, a suboptimal recovery could mean not just lost playing time, but diminished career trajectory. The modern T20 format has transformed cricket into a sport that demands repeated maximal sprints, sharp cuts, and sustained high-intensity efforts within short time frames. Unlike traditional batsmen who might run a handful of singles, power hitters like David face cumulative eccentric loading every innings. Each sprint, boundary attempt, and defensive scramble taxes the hamstring. Fatigue compounds this risk by reducing neuromuscular control and the muscle's elastic stiffness, two key protective factors against tearing. Thus, the injury did not occur in isolation, but likely on a backdrop of accumulated micro-trauma and diminished resilience. Yet, there is good news. The clinical evidence from other elite athletes with comparable or even more severe hamstring injuries shows that a return to pre-injury performance is achievable with a structured, evidence-based rehabilitation approach. For example, an English Premier League footballer with a high-grade intramuscular hamstring tendon tear returned to competition in roughly 120 days, regaining 95% plus of pre-injury maximal sprint velocity and match running output. The cornerstone of this success was early and progressive eccentric loading exercises, objective neuromuscular testing to ensure symmetry, and GPS-monitored running progression to prevent sudden training spikes that could trigger re-injury. Tim David's rehabilitation will likely follow a phased protocol spanning approximately 4 to 8 weeks, starting with pain management, isometric strengthening, and range of motion restoration. By weeks 3 to 4, eccentric loading exercises such as Nordic hamstring curls, widely regarded as the gold standard, will be introduced. These exercises have been shown to increase muscle fascicle length by up to 13%, boost eccentric strength beyond pre-injury levels, and dramatically reduce re-injury risk. By weeks 5 to 6, gradual exposure to high-speed running and sport-specific drills will begin, culminating in maximal effort sprints and competitive training by weeks 7 to 8. Importantly, return to play is not simply about the absence of pain. The clinical criteria emphasize functional milestones: pain-free jogging at 25 to 50% max velocity, progressing to 8%, and finally controlled maximal sprinting at 100%. Strength symmetry is critical, with Nordic hamstring curl strength needing to reach at least 90% of the uninjured leg, alongside less than 10% asymmetry in posterior chain force and knee extension range of motion. Psychological readiness is equally vital. Fear of re-injury, or kinesiophobia, can be a silent performance killer. It manifests as hesitation during acceleration, unconscious guarding that reduces power output by up to 20%, and avoidance of sprint drills during training. Modern rehabilitation integrates psychological screening using tools like the Tampa scale of kinesiophobia and graded exposure therapy to rebuild confidence alongside physical capacity. When David returns to training, coaches and medical staff will watch closely for red flags: asymmetrical running posture, reduced push-off power, hesitation during maximal sprints, slack gluteal activation during change of direction drills, and inability to perform explosive plyometric tasks. Recurrent swelling or sharp pain during eccentric exercises could indicate incomplete healing or more extensive tendon involvement, demanding reassessment. Objective strength testing using isokinetic dynamometry or force platforms provides the gold standard for confirming readiness. If the injured leg produces less than 90% of the uninjured leg's force, it's premature to return to full competition. Historically, the story of hamstring injuries in cricket is a tale of two paths. Some athletes fall into the recurring injury cycle. Premature return leads to repeated strains, progressively shorter muscle fascicles, diminished eccentric force capacity, and eroded confidence. This hamstring curse has derailed promising careers, with psychological barriers compounding physical deficits. On the other hand, the modern era's integration of GPS tracking, advanced eccentric loading protocols, MRI-guided management, and psychological interventions offers a transformative advantage. Tim David's access to these resources positions him well to break the cycle and return stronger. The recovery timeline, while optimistic, is not without uncertainty. Factors such as intramuscular tendon disruption, extent of muscle involvement, psychological readiness, and pre-injury fatigue levels can extend rehabilitation beyond 8 weeks. However, David's youth, elite conditioning, and the support infrastructure of Australian cricket provide strong biological and logistical support for a timely recovery. Given his explosive playing style, the question remains: can Tim David adapt if the injury impacts his raw speed and power? Or is his game too reliant on millisecond-perfect acceleration to allow for compensation? This debate will be key as his rehabilitation unfolds. Fans and analysts alike will be watching his first training videos for signs of hesitation or biomechanical compensations that could hint at lingering deficits. In the best-case scenario, David will progress through his rehabilitation phases, hitting functional milestones without pain or guarding, restoring symmetrical strength and flexibility, and overcoming psychological barriers through graded exposure. He could return to competitive cricket by late February, just in time to contribute in the lead-up to the T20 World Cup. However, the highest risk window for re-injury is the first 2 weeks post-return, underscoring the need for cautious, data-driven clearance decisions. For the fans, the immediate milestone to watch is inflammation control and restoration of pain-free range of motion in the first 2 weeks. This foundation sets the stage for the rapid eccentric loading and progressive running exposure that follow. The community might ask, based on similar grade 2 hamstring strains in explosive cricket athletes, who is the unlucky player that never fully recovered? And can Tim David avoid that fate with modern rehabilitation science? Who should be the next athlete or injury case we break down? Is there a specific incident or player whose injury story you want to understand beyond the headlines? At the Injury Breakdown, we don't guess outcomes. We explain them, bridging the gap between clinical science and fan passion. Tim David's grade 2 hamstring strain is a significant but manageable injury. It represents a structural failure of the critical high-tension cable that powers his explosive game. The clinical evidence supports a 4 to 8-week recovery window with rigorous eccentric loading, GPS-monitored running progression, and psychological readiness assessment. The stakes are high because premature return risks recurrence, delayed return risks lost performance, and fear of re-injury can silently erode explosiveness. With modern sports medicine advancements, David has the tools to not only return, but to reclaim his dominant form on the cricket field.